Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today we have another installment of the interview series hosted by EIX, the Entrepreneur and Innovation Exchange. I'm Dan Forbes, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Management. I've also been named a Schultz Distinguished Professor of Entrepreneurship by the Richard M. Schultz Family Foundation. My guest today is Jeff Freeland Nelson, the founder and CEO of YOXO, and inventor of the YOXO sustainable building sets. He's also a part-time carpenter, designer, electrician, musician, sculptor, painter, and a restorer of an old barn. Jeff is originally from Iowa. He holds a bachelor's degree from Hamline University in St. Paul and a master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. He began his career as technical director at the Minnesota Children's Museum, where he spent thousands of hours learning from kids at play. Later, he served as the founder and executive director of the St. Paul Arts and Culture Partnership, a collaboration of 40 regional arts organizations, and he also worked as a producer and public affairs director for American Public Media and Minnesota Public Radio. He was appointed Director of Cultural Development for the City of St. Paul and later served as Managing Director of McNally Smith College, a for-profit music college in St. Paul. Jeff founded YOXO in 2011. It was originally known as Play from Scratch, and since then, the company's toys have won praise from parents, the media, and others for making toys which are creative, locally manufactured, and produced with a strong sense of environmental responsibility. The company raised money initially from family and friends, and subsequently from Kickstarter and angel investors. In 2014, YOXO won the general division of the Minnesota Cup, the country's largest statewide new venture business plan competition. And their company, the YOXO company, continues to grow, and I'm sure he'll tell us more about that today. Thank you for joining us today, Jeff.
It's good to be here.
I have a few questions for you that I'm hoping you will enable you to share some of your insights with the world at large as to what it's like to be an entrepreneur and to manage a company in its early stages. Mm-hmm. My first question is, were there telltale signs early in your life that demonstrated entrepreneurship?
So this might get me in trouble, but I don't think I'm an entrepreneur.
Really?
So you maybe want to stop the tape. We can be done now.
Tell us more about that.
It's one of the realizations as you dig into running a business.
Okay.
And you start to realize your strengths and your weaknesses. And I have realized this is one of those things, it starts that process of learning that I'm an inventor.
Okay.
Not an entrepreneur.
Interesting.
And so in starting YOXO and taking YOXO to scale, the things that I've never struggled with are the inventor side. What I've always struggled with is the part that's being an entrepreneur. So the hard knocks that I've gone through really are on the entrepreneurship side. And so the telltale signs, all of them, if I think back to my childhood, I was constantly making things, inventing things. And going back to when I was 8 years old, my parents gave me a box of tape, string, and wire. And that idea of playing with raw materials and inventing your own toys, that's really what stuck with me for 30 years and led to Play from Scratch and now YOXO. Okay. I wasn't the kid who was the master at door-to-door candle sales. I didn't want to create, I wasn't out there with a lemonade stand or coming up with some weird sort of kid version of a hedge fund. Like that was not my childhood. Okay. And so it's interesting to be in my role as CEO of a company and to also have to sort of say to everyone, keep in mind, I'm the inventor at the table. And everything that I'm good at as an entrepreneur, I've had to learn.
Interesting. Can you tell us about your decision to become an entrepreneur?
So, again, for me, it started with the idea. It started with the product. And I think that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are inventors. And I think there's some real strengths to being the inventor. There are also some challenges. And so my path as an entrepreneur with YOXO, now, first thing I should say, now, with all of that, this is my third company. So I certainly have a passion for starting things and starting businesses. The other two were nonprofits by design. YOXO is a nonprofit by accident or something, whatever. But the challenge of being, of making something has always been at my core. My journey with YOXO really does begin with this idea of how can we give kids a great play experience that leads to them being more creative or actually just holding on to the innate creativity they already have.
Right.
And that really is a it begins with an invention,
Right.
which is these Y's, O's, and X's that link together to make stuff.
Right.
The journey since then has been, how do you build a great business? And we're making great progress. How do you build a great business around that great idea?
Okay. Let's stop for a moment and talk about your invention in particular, because I think it's such a core part of your particular business. Talk to us a little about the YOXO toys and what they consist of and how you came across this idea.
So when I started the company, it was called Play from Scratch, and it was tubes and boxes and tape, really inspired by those toys my parents gave me way back when. And so sold a ton of tubes and boxes and tape in that first month that we launched, which was December of 2012. We went out and started selling stuff, and we sold like $15,000 worth of tubes and boxes and tape, which is actually a lot of tubes and boxes and tape. Wanted that to become the business, but very quickly realized that the toy business is very seasonal. So tons of sales in December, and then January hit, and it just flatlined like nothing, not a dollar. I was like, what happened to my business? Realized that we really needed partners to take the company to the next stage, and that meant stores. So went to Creative Kid Stuff, pitched my tubes and boxes and tape to them, and they said, love it, this is great, but it will never sell. That's not a retail toy.
Okay.
And so I had to step back and say, how do I capture the same idea, this open-ended, creative construction play, the same idea, which is really was my wife's idea of making toys out of recycled and recyclable materials, but put that in a package that will sell on a retail shelf.
Right.
And so the shapes I started playing with to make these tubes connect started turning into Y's, O's, and X's. And so I was sitting there one day with these connecting devices, these links, laid them out, and it spelled YOXO, and that was that.
That's where the name came from then.
Yeah.
I like that story, and I've told that example. You've talked about being in a studio across from Creative Kid Stuff, which was your first retailer, and you actually had a product that you brought to them, if I'm not mistaken. You had this product that you'd sold $15,000 worth of, and tell us a little bit about what was inadequate about that product and what forced you to pivot. One of the reasons I like that story is it's an example of a pivot.
Yeah.
And when you see the before and after version of that, it's such a clear example of what's been learned from input, from customer and retailer input.
So yeah, it was the enormous tube of tubes, the world famous box of boxes. That was the product, and it was boxes and tape and tubes, and awesome. However, not something that if you put it on a retail shelf, you actually would walk by it and you think that someone had forgot some packing boxes behind. Even though it was designed beautifully and really looked exciting, the challenge was that this color, this play pattern, and this perception in the minds of the consumer that, oh, it's boxes. Boxes have no value. It's tubes. I have those in my recycling. Why would I go to a store and buy that? Again, a direct customer to our website, when we found them, they loved it, and we sold a lot of these. The other challenge is that they were just big.
Right.
They were huge. I
Interesting.
mean, it was, the box of boxes was this big, and it just took up a ton of shelf space for something that really you could only charge $20 or $25 for.
It. Too much inventory.
Too much
space.
cubic footage for the product. So the pivot really came around, what does it take to be a hit toy in a toy store, keeping in mind open-ended play, recyclable, all of the sort of mission part of what we're doing.
Right.
And that, we needed a brand, we needed bright packaging, we needed color, and all of that came together in the form of YOXO. So the same buying team that said, love the tubes and boxes, but it'll never sell.
Okay.
When I brought in YOXO, they said, great, we'd like an exclusive.
Great.
And so it was a very different response.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you share a brief timeline of your entrepreneurial journey? And this can extend back to some prior nonprofits that you founded, or you can simply start it with YOXO if you prefer.
Well, it probably really starts back in when I was 8.
Okay.
And it was
Let's go
having
there,
that box of stuff.
Yeah.
The journey, and this is more of the invention journey.
Yeah.
But I remember even back then holding that box with tape and string and wire, thinking someone should sell this. This is a product. I would buy this. I would force my parents, go get me more tape. So that stuck there. And I think there are a lot of people that are in my position or have had a business or invented something where they can trace it back to their childhood.
Absolutely.
Now, flash forward, one of the really formative parts of my journey is that I was a theater major.
Okay.
And I'm probably the only parent or one of the few parents that I'm forcing my kids to be a theater major. I don't care if they excel at football. Nope. You're a theater major.
Interesting.
And there's a reason for this. I'm joking, but there's a reason for this. In theater, you learn how to make things.
Okay.
You learn how to work on a deadline.
Yep.
You learn how to work with other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is a fantastic school of project management.
Interesting.
And so suddenly you're just marching along, and there's this, an audience will be in here, and we will give them a show.
Yes.
And that requires people and money and materials
Props
and
so
props
forth.
and rehearsals and all the things that go into that event are very, very transferable to the act of starting a business.
Great.
I knew that and when I graduated, theater was not my life.
Okay.
I thought maybe it would be. I was more on the technical and directing side.
Okay.
But what I did realize is that I really enjoyed that working together with other people to start something.
Yeah.
And so that I started my own theater company, first nonprofit. And we did Shakespeare, we did Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We did these epic productions, which is a great way to max out your credit card, but also a lot of fun. And the company survived. I actually handed it off, and other people took it, and it continued to thrive. And then my next nonprofit was really a spin out of that, which was all around co-marketing arts and culture. Okay. And also that, again, I handed that off, and people took that.
Great.
And it continued to thrive. So that starting a business part is pretty addictive.
Yes.
And so then after that, I kind of stepped back, and I got a job, and I got married, and tried to be responsible. But always there was that itch of, man, it'd be really fun to be doing my own thing again, or to really be able to move an idea forward again. It's an unfortunate reality that no matter what, if you're in a bigger corporate environment, just moving the ball from this side of the room to the other side of the room is really hard, and to a certain degree should be. Versus when it's your own business, you pick up the ball and you move it to the other side of the room. Now, you might be moving it to the wrong side of the room, but you've moved it.
Right.
And so I always remembered being 22 and starting my theater company and the enjoyment of that work. So through my career and working for the government, for profits, and then for American public media, I always was waiting for the idea to come, and the idea came in 2011, really informed by my children that I didn't like the toys they were playing with. Okay. And then once that was it, was like, all right, we're going to do this again. Yeah. This time with married and a mortgage and kids, which I'm not sure I recommend. But what it did mean is the stakes were higher, which means that I worked harder, and the company has grown very quickly because of that. Interesting. One of the things that I find interesting about your background is that you've moved across sectoral boundaries quite fluidly. You spent some time working for Minnesota Public Radio, a nonprofit organization, worked for the city of St. Paul, a public sector organization, and now your company is a for-profit company. What can you tell us about that kind of movement? And are, for people out there who are wondering how to make those kinds of moves, or if it's even possible to make those moves, what would you say to them? Well, definitely they're different. Now, Minnesota Public Radio, American Public Media is a very entrepreneurial nonprofit. Okay. And so, and in particular, the founder, a guy named Bill Kling, who's somewhat infamous in this community, and but a really, for me, inspiring guy, because he started it 45 years ago and stuck with it for 40 years. And remained to sort of the entrepreneur in the room. He would be the one sitting around a table, and he'd be like, well, what if we could do this? And what if we do that? Just spouting out ideas. Many of the ideas, didn't sound like a nonprofit idea. Okay. And actually some of the biggest successes coming out of Minnesota Public Radio are not just the nonprofit, but they created Greenspring and Rivertown Trading. They created these for-profit businesses, most of which were eventually spun out and sold. So I do think that while the nonprofit model and the for-profit model are very different, There is a lot of learning that you can take. I do think, YOXO, we are a mission-driven for-profit.
Okay.
And I would say most of the angel investors that support this business are in it because of our mission.
Interesting.
Not just because they're expecting exponential returns.
Yes.
And those investors that do expect exponential returns aren't interested in YOXO.
Okay.
Now, we're going to deliver exponential
Yes,
returns.
yes, yes.
But first and foremost, we're trying to do something for a reason.
Yeah.
And make a profit.
Right.
And I think that that's inspiring to a lot of people.
Yes.
And you'll see a lot of that. There's the public benefit corporation idea. There are a lot of for-profits out there that are saying, hey, we don't need a special tax status, and we don't need to give people a deduction for contributions.
Right.
We're a for-profit. We're making money, but we're going to do it for a reason. And I think that blending place is very powerful.
Yes.
And I think we'll start to see more and more companies doing that really well and making the world hopefully better while they're doing it.
Yes. Now, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there are different sort of tax statuses and legal statuses for these for-profit entities. Now we have B Corps, for example. Talk to us a little bit about your choice to be the kind of corporation you are. How did what went into your decision to not select some of these alternative types?
So at least in Minnesota, or B Corp wasn't an option when I founded the company. And then, this is one of those times when you seek expertise.
Yes.
And so, you're on the conference call with your lawyer and your accountant, and you say, what form shall we take?
Yes.
And they say, you should be an LLC.
Okay.
And then you push on a little bit, like, what about this and what about this?
Yeah.
And then, but at the, sort of universal understanding that at the stage that we're in and the growth trajectory we're on, it makes perfect sense to be an LLC.
Got it.
Are there times that I'm like, ooh, it'd be fun to be a B Corp? Sure. But then the lawyers and the accountants say, well, fun is nice, Jeff.
Yes.
I'm a lawyer, I'm an accountant.
Yes.
This is what we're going to do.
Interesting. Thank you. What were some of the make or break moments in your career? Some of the most sort of defining moments that you've had so far?
So, one of the great experiences of entrepreneurship I've found, and I have a lot of wonderful mentors and advisors around me who have gone through this journey as well, is it's extremely humbling.
Okay.
You are always, or at least I am, always confronted with my own blind spots and my own limitations. There have been times in my career when I worked for bigger organizations or bigger companies where I truly felt like I was using 25% of my capacity that day. I'd be in meetings where I'm not sure what the meeting was for or why they called it or what decision was being made, but okay, here I am.
Yes.
It's going to be an hour.
Somebody wants me to be here, and so
I'm clocking in. I don't have that anymore.
Yes.
I am pushing 100% of my capacity every day, if not more. So I think what that means is that, and actually it's a joke that my wife and I have where quite frequently I'll call her at the end of the day, I'm on my way home, and she'll say, how was your day? And I'll say, oh, this was a really intense day. We had this and this and this. And there'll be this pause, and she'll always say, well, every day is an intense day because that's pretty much what I say every day.
Right.
And
she sees the pattern day after
day.
Yeah,
and that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's hard, and I do think a lot of entrepreneurs, you are always teetering on the edge of burnout because of that.
Yeah.
And so instead of saying, is there a particular make or break moment? I would say that the exercise of entrepreneurship, especially at the stage that we're in right now, you're in sort of a perpetual make or break moment.
Yes, I can imagine.
And so, is that scary? Yes. Is it fun? Absolutely.
So let me kind of invert that question a little bit. How do you recharge, and how do you find moments to sort of relax, and what keeps you going through that grueling pace that you're put through?
So when I was younger, I remember working till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, every night, just because I liked what I was doing. But there was no big project, just kind of like, oh, this is fun, and I don't have anything else going on. And, I had a girlfriend, but, might as well just get this done.
Right.
I have a family now.
Okay.
And we actually have in the handbook for YOXO, it's called the Family First Policy.
Interesting.
We are a toy company. We are obsessed with children's, with advancing the needs of children and raising creative children. Keeping me or any of my colleagues away from their families doesn't make any sense if we're about children. So I am home, unless I'm traveling, I am home at 5:30.
Got it.
And so that doesn't mean I stop thinking about work. And that's something that I do struggle with, is that it's kind of running and taking up 30% of my RAM at any given time.
Understood.
But I'm home and I'm with my kids and I'm with my wife and we have dinner together. There's no tech at the table. We are focused on family time. So that's the first part.
Yeah.
I think the other
Having
part...
that structure sounds really important. The fact that you have to plan your day to leave the office to be home at 5:30, and you just know that that's coming. You organize your day differently than if you had those hours in the evening to do that.
Well, and a lot of people have said this, and I think it's true, that if you're an entrepreneur, you are allowing yourself to be in a very fluid and permeable relationship with work. So it's not like I go to work and then I clock off and I go home. It's like I'm kind of always working.
Yes.
There's no such thing as vacation.
Understood.
But there is this, the benefit of that is it also means I'm always kind of at home. I mean, there's always this sense of, with work and life blended, that means that I can be home playing with my kids, luckily at the toy company with toys, and I'm learning, and this is an important part of product development.
Interesting.
Or my wife and kids come with me to do a demo at Whole Foods. We're playing, but we're also selling.
Interesting.
So if you just allow it, it's like people talk about work-life balance. I think in this kind of stage for my kind of company, you just say, I have none. And that's okay.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Obviously, in your case, since you do toys, it's easier for you to blend the family part, given that you have young kids at the same time. But probably even for entrepreneurs who aren't working on toys, there are ways to get the family involved. In fact, whether the family knows it or not, they're along for the ride. And
well, you have a warehouse, so hey, we have big wheels at the warehouse, so it's like the kids can ride big wheels. And how do you use what you're doing as a way to grow closer to your family, as opposed to a barrier?
That's a good question to pose, whether it's a toy company or not.
I also think having some other interests, and it's you don't have time, so that's a challenge. The one thing that I wish I could buy or trade for is just more hours in the day. But I'm also at the same time I'm trying to give myself a self-taught degree in theoretical physics. So late at night after the kids are asleep, I love to open up theoretical physics textbooks.
Interesting. Seriously, this is not okay.
For real. And the reason is,
I thought you were saying that as a metaphor.
No,
or something,
no, it's like actual like quantum mechanics. And it's mainly because I've realized I need to reorient my brain. And if I'm so thick into the opportunities and challenges of the moment at YOXO, I'm never going to solve them. Just by obsessively thinking about them. So what I do is I pick up these, relatively accessible textbooks, open them up, read a little bit until it completely fries my brain. I know multiple universes and you name it. And then I can sleep. And I also find that I'm able to address the challenges in front of the company better the next day.
That's great. I totally believe in that, taking your brain to a different place, working different kinds of muscles, so to speak, in your brain. That makes sense to me as a way of refreshing. Talk to us about your mentors. You mentioned a moment ago that you have a circle of mentors and people who help you with different parts of your business. Who are some of those people and how did you meet them?
So, one of the smart things I did, and I did many not so smart things at the beginning, but the one thing that I do really push on entrepreneurs who are just starting out that come to me is I formed an advisory board immediately, before we had a name, before we had a logo, before we had anything, a product. I went to the smartest people I knew who had a diverse set of experiences around starting businesses or running businesses or finance or design, all the pieces that go into something like YOXO, and just said, would you be on my advisory board? You get no pay, but we'll meet 4 times a year, and I'll buy you coffee.
You were clear about the terms.
Then. So very low barrier to entry. It's 4 times a year, and we'll schedule it so that it'll work for everybody. And for the most part, everyone said yes. And suddenly, I had some quasi-famous people on my advisory board, and more important than them being quasi-famous is the fact that they are really insightful and smart. And so, suddenly it's instantly it's not me, it's me plus these a dozen other people. And not only are they giving me their advice and expertise, they gave me the right to use their name. So when I went to start talking to investors, it's not just me.
Yes.
It's me and this list of advisors.
Yes.
And that group, many of whom have been a part of it from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Some of them since subsequently have become investors.
Okay.
Some have become staff.
Okay.
Some have become staff and then they're not staff and they go back to advisors, then they're staff again.
Okay.
Some of them now are on our governing board. So we have an advisory board that's now very large, about 20 people.
Okay.
And then we have a governing board of just 5.
Okay.
And 2 of those folks have been advisors for many years and then just graduated to, it's not necessarily that the governing board is higher or more important, it's just a different role.
Plays a different role. It's a more formal role from a governance standpoint, I imagine.
Right. I mean, you can edit this out, but the governing board's job is to kick my ass.
Understood. On behalf of the investors, this is part of what entrepreneurship involves when you take on investors, and it's a mixed blessing. Ideally, they do that in an encouraging way.
And they do. In a very supportive
yes.
Way. But advisory board meetings,
Yeah.
we throw ideas out
Yeah.
and people just bounce ideas around.
Yeah.
It's great and everyone has a
Yeah.
good time. Governing board meetings, it is numbers and
Accountability.
and you don't end the meeting with like, oh, good luck with that, Jeff. It's
Yeah.
like you're getting back to us in 3 days about that, right, Jeff?
Understood.
Which is fantastic.
Great. It probably helps as we think about how you put that board together. It probably helps that you had spent a number of years working in these other organizations and other industries, so that you had a network of people to go to as you started to populate that board. I can imagine a lot of people would like to do something like that, and they may not know where to look. What advice would you give them in terms of how to populate a board like that?
Well, if you can, start thinking about who you would want around you now, long before you have the idea or decide to start the business. So.
Okay.
I think, unfortunately, there are sometimes folks, they'll come out of school or graduate, and they're like, all right, I'm going to start a business. And so then when they go to meet with folks, it's like, hi, you've never met me before. I'm Jeff. I've got this idea.
Right.
Would you be on my advisory board? And they're like, hey, I don't even know you.
Right.
Everyone that I went to be on our advisory board in the beginning had known me for years.
Got it.
And so it wasn't a cold call.
Understood.
And even folks that were on our advisory board who are now our investors and they have the means to put money into the company. Again, I had a relationship with them for years before then. So you don't want the first meeting with someone to be you're asking for something. And even more importantly, can you give them something?
Yes.
So create those relationships, nurture those relationships,
Okay.
base those on common trust and interest and an exchange, and then it'll be very natural.
That's great. What were some of the things that you were able to give them in the early stages of the company?
So, one of the interesting things is how we've had a few advisors and even investors who have started their own business.
Okay.
And they've said that they've been watching YOXO along the way, and it's been a great education for them about what to do and what
Right.
not to do sometimes.
Right.
And that's been fun.
Yes, I imagine.
And then quite a few of them have had businesses that they've either sold or they're still running.
Right.
And I think for them, they use YOXO as kind of a regeneration
Yes.
place. It's like to go back to the perhaps more basics.
Yep.
Um,
It's their version of theoretical physics, maybe.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure for some of them, it's just a chore. It's like, oh, Jeff needs me to come to
Understood.
another meeting. But I think for the most part, it's also just a great network. I think some people
They meet each
love
other
it. They
and
meet each
value
other.
that,
I mean,
yeah.
forget me. They are a really interesting group of people
Good.
and enjoy each other.
Good. What's the most valuable lesson you've learned as an entrepreneur?
I think, not to be too harsh, but it's realizing that you don't know anything.
Okay.
With an underline under the word no.
Okay.
It's very easy, I think when people start businesses to create an elaborate business plan that gets deep into all of the research and the data and the opportunity and all of that. And that's important.
Yes.
I would recommend it be 2 or 3 pages long, not 25 pages long.
Okay.
Because there's a lot you don't know. And until you get your product out into the world, we're a consumer product company, so that's the sort of the frame I'm putting this through. But until you put that out into the world, you don't know
Yeah.
if it's going to sell.
Right.
And is product A going to sell better than product B or product C? And there'll be logic that you'll apply to it ahead of, like, well, product A is cheaper, so more people will buy it.
Yeah.
And then they buy C.
Right.
Why? I don't know.
Right.
And then you try to figure that out. And I think that that's very hard.
Yes.
And it's really difficult when you put products out there and this one sells and that one doesn't.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's an important life lesson just for parenting and relationships and all these things that, you don't know.
Yeah.
All you can do is try.
Interesting. So we have informed guesses about certain things, and we can see how valid they are just by throwing stuff out there and trying to act as though the things we believe are true. But we don't really know whether they're true until the market gives us information, or until some partner or relationship gives us information that affirms it.
Yeah, and there's a software development method where it's sort of a launch and perfect. You could sit there and code and code and code and code and code, and then it's like, all right, it's ready.
Right.
And then you launch it, and you realize there's some mistake. You missed something.
Right.
There's another method where it's like you get it to it's good enough, it's a minimally viable product.
Yes.
You put it out there and then see what happens.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we've tried to follow that method. Now, it's difficult when every time you put a product out there, maybe that's $200,000 invested in that product, or $300 or $1 million. I mean, it's expensive to put it out there.
Even though you're doing it leanly, it's not free.
It's
or
not
cheap.
free.
Yeah.
And or you're working with a partner. You get that. Hey, we got that product in Target.
Right.
Is it a perfect product? We think it is, but we're not sure.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's also where you start thinking about your pace of growth. Is there a way to grow at a fast clip? We grew 500% last year.
Wow.
So 492% technically.
Okay.
That was insane.
Yeah.
I don't recommend that, especially in a consumer product business, because, and especially in a business like ours where we design it, we market it, and we make it.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually manufacture our stuff.
Yes.
Growing that fast is very hard on a business.
Yeah.
If there's a way that you can pace your growth while you're doing these tests, so you dial it in, and then you find like, wow, that product really is flying, then get the distribution.
Yeah.
I think that's a better path forward.
Interesting. Talk to us a little bit about, you brought up lean startup techniques and minimum viable products. What's your thinking as you hear people talk about that in the marketplace of ideas these days? How do you feel about lean startup? Do you believe in this, or do you have a critical angle on it in some way?
I do, and there are many different methodologies, and I'm a fan of kind of learning about all of them, or trying to learn about all of them, but not following one with sort of this passionate, this is the only way to do it.
Yes.
I also do agree, and I've talked to other folks interested in starting businesses, and I've said, get to revenue as quick as you can.
Yes.
You can't sit, and burn cash. Hire a team, and you've got glorious offices. I mean, I've heard these horror stories of these startups where it's like, look at our office, and our CEO just got a new car, and it's like, what's your revenue? And it's like, well, we're pre-revenue, but we've got IP. It's like whatever their excuses. And I really like the idea of getting to revenue. And if and my board has told me, don't spend a lot of time thinking about if I do this again. If I ever do this again, I think that I would try to get to revenue, almost in the first week.
Even faster than
Will someone somewhere buy something from me in this?
Yes.
Oh, okay, they're not. Well, why not? And then you try this, and then sort of, and that part of sort of a lean startup, I really am a fan of.
Okay.
Which gets back to this whole idea of you don't know.
Yes.
Until somebody tells you.
Understood.
Preferably your customer.
Yeah. What's your advice to students and aspiring entrepreneurs?
So, I recently went back to one of my alma maters and gave a speech, and it was a particularly challenging day. And challenging to me is not a negative or positive thing; it was just hard. And that question came up, and from a student. And I think for me, and again, I'm coming at this as more of an inventor than an entrepreneur, because I think as an entrepreneur, you can do it for the pure act of entrepreneurship. I'm doing it because I'm trying to take a product that I think means something to the world.
Yes.
And because of that, you have to love it. You have to need to do it. And that was kind of I was trying to put the emphasis on that. Years ago, I met with a guy when I was doing theater, and I thought I was going to be the world's next Robert Wilson, sort of a famous theater director. And I said, I want to be a director. Okay. And he said, but you need to be a director. And I was like, well, that's kind of a dumb question. And this was a guy who worked at the Guthrie, really smart guy. And then I asked him, like, what do you mean, do I need to do it? And he said, well, when you wake up in the morning, do you think, I need to be a director? Is there an itch that you have to scratch? And I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think in the case of an inventor turned entrepreneur, you have to passionately need to do it.
Okay.
Because that's what's going to get you through how hard it is to do.
Yes.
Because otherwise you'll just give up.
Good. Good. Talk to us a little bit about the mission of your business. You've talked about how important it is, and there are several components to that mission. It has to do with children's creativity, as well as the way that you make your toys and the way that you source your materials and so forth. What is it about that contributes to your sense that you need to do this, or that this is worth doing and going through the hard parts?
Well, I think it's important when you're a mission-driven for-profit in particular that you divide your mission into two parts.
Okay.
There's the mission, the parts of your mission that are core to everything you do,
Okay.
that you will never give up.
Okay.
Because you feel like actually that's the window to success and to winning your customers. There are other parts of your mission, like they're nice to do, that are ways that you can perhaps have less of an environmental impact or employ a different set of people. But you realize that if you have to, you're going to give that up in support of the core.
Understood.
So for us, the core is keep kids creating. That's our mission.
Okay.
It's very easy to remember. And what's great is that really is an important gate that every decision goes through.
Okay.
Does this keep kids creating?
Okay.
And there have been many opportunities that have come up where someone will come to us and say, hey, I've got this big idea. I want you to make environmentally sustainable cremation urns for me.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And there
That
might
fits
be,
with part of that periphery that you were talking about, but it's not really part of the core.
It's not where you're not keeping kids creating.
Right.
We had someone who said, we really would like for you to make YOXO-based MRI simulators for hospitals.
Interesting.
So kids can climb into it and get the experience of being in an MRI,
Wow.
but it's fun and it's recyclable
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Again, great opportunity. There might even be money behind it.
Right.
But are we keeping kids creating? No.
Yes.
And so that gate is really important.
Understood.
Then, the next level for us is environmental sustainability.
Okay.
And that is, part of it is trying to earn a different kind of customer. Part of it is just being able to sleep at night.
Okay.
I don't want to pump thousands of tons of plastic out into the world,
Okay.
or bad plastic out into the world. So that really matters.
Yeah.
And so we have, we call it our mantra,
Okay.
which is that YOXO is the sustainable, recyclable, made in the USA, invent anything you can imagine toy company. And that kind of encompasses that next layer.
Got it.
We were made in the USA. That's another piece of it that's really important. Now, at some point, would we discover there's no way for us to make this in the USA and achieve the first goal?
Yes.
Well, then, okay,
Understood.
it's about the first goal.
Okay.
We may discover down the road that in order to achieve the first goal, we have to manufacture stuff for some other people just because we've got the machines and why not? And that money could help feed that.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
as long as it's feeding that first
So
goal.
there's a clear sense of prioritization among the different components of your mission.
Yeah.
Good.
And, along with that is always make money.
Okay.
And I think that there is a wonderful clarifying sense that you get from the profit motive.
I can understand
And
that.
in the nonprofit world, something I did struggle with was you could just sort of coast along on, well, we're a nonprofit.
Yes.
And with all due respect to everyone in the nonprofit world, some nonprofits kind of like, well, hey, as long as the dollars are coming in, the donor dollars, it's okay that we're not solving the problem.
Right.
There's something very focusing about having to balance the books.
Interesting. Interesting. Give us a few facts about the company, if you would. Where do you sell through? How many different products or kits do you have? And who buys your products? And if you're, to the extent that you're comfortable, can you share some metrics with us? You mentioned that you grew 500% last year, for example.
Yeah, so we're definitely at that scaling phase.
Okay.
And the challenge for us is we have to grow all areas of the company in parallel, and actually we need to grow some parts of the company faster than others
Okay.
so that they're ready.
Okay.
So if our sales grow, we have to grow our manufacturing capacity.
Right.
And we usually have to grow our manufacturing capacity 6 to 12 months ahead of
Okay.
sales
Okay.
because you don't just, we don't get a big order and then buy the machine.
Okay.
And so, all of those things are moving along. we're very lucky to get into Target stores very quickly.
Okay.
I would say, probably more quickly than any other toy that I'm aware of, and probably more quickly than most consumer goods.
Okay.
And so what that forced us to do is to really grow our production capacity. So we went from, a few dozen stores to a few hundred stores, and then overnight with Target, we were in a few thousand stores.
Wow.
And so that's exciting.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. And now what we're really trying to do is to hedge against Target because we're not sure that we're going to be in Target.
I understand.
We're not sure we're going to be in Target 4 months from now. And so now we're seeking other stores.
Okay.
We just landed our first 2 sort of mass retailers in Canada,
Okay.
Indigo and London Drug.
Okay.
And we actually think the Made in the USA message may resonate in Canada even more than it does in the US, which is strange, but might be true.
Who knows? Yeah.
So we're now in about 2,000 doors,
Okay.
and continue to grow rapidly. I think the challenge for us right now is how do we grow and focus.
Okay.
So we have about a dozen SKUs,
Okay.
different products that are different all around the YOXO brand, all different age groups, so targeted for younger kids, older kids, different geometries and different characters. Over the next few months, we're really trying to rationalize that and invest in the best performing SKUs. Both, what is going to sell through the most, and also what can we manufacture the most efficiently.
Okay.
And that's going to be a hard process because every product we put out is like a child. Not an extremely important child, but a child. And you want to, you hold on to it. You love that.
I understand.
And to let those go is tough. But this is a time where we need to prune
Yes.
and focus the energy of the company so that we can stay on this pace of growth.
Okay.
I don't think we're actually hoping not to grow 500% this year,
Right.
but we would like to double the company in the next year. And that's going to mean a lot of work
That's great.
and a lot of focus.
Okay. My last question, Jeff, is do you have a favorite quote or motto?
I do. It's there are many, and this I'm sure someone has said this before, but there is a struggle as an entrepreneur, which is you look at other companies around you, and if you really want to beat yourself up, you look at Facebook.
Okay.
But I can look at other startup toy companies or other startup consumer goods company, and then really beat myself up. Like, why aren't we them?
Understood.
For one reason or another. And then, of course, usually if I dig deep enough, I actually find out we're ahead of them.
Right.
But the quote that I really love is, "It takes years of work to become an overnight success."
Interesting.
That there is extreme. Actually, one of my advisors told me years ago. The key to success as an entrepreneur is grit. You just keep doing it,
Yes.
no matter what.
Yes.
And time is on your side. If you let it go and let it grow, eventually you're going to earn more and more and more customers, and that's going to help you create this thing.
Right.
And so many brands that we know and love and think of as an overnight success, invested 10, 20, 25 years
Yes.
to the point that everyone knew about them.
Right. Right.
And
That
again,
part of the story doesn't get told oftentimes, that we often just focus on the successful part.
Right.
And you don't see the many failures or the years of trial before that.
well, it's the unicorns. It's everyone's like,
Yes.
well, let's look for those unicorns. Well, there are very few of them.
Right.
And even some of them that you might look at and think, there it is. That's what I'm talking about. The company that went from nowhere to everywhere. If you dig down, you find out, well, actually, either it's that person's 15th startup,
Right.
and there were 7 failures,
Right.
or, well, actually, they were doing that for 2 decades,
Right.
and then they just did a pivot, they got it right, and here they are.
Interesting.
So patience is important,
Yes.
and just a ton
Yes.
of hard work.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about revenue too. Is giving yourself some runway to make those experiments and to let those long-term things come to fruition. If you don't manage the front end well enough, you don't have the time to do that or the resources to do that.
Yep.
Great, Jeff. Thanks so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your sharing your time with me and with the people watching.
Thank you.